So redneck.
No, I loved Uncle George Mattis. I loved him. He was ready to roll. Good. Why is that? I think we're going to go ahead and get started. You ready? Interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can get your attention, I'm glad everybody made it. I'm sorry we're in this stormy, nasty weather. This is the July 20th, 2022 meeting of the City of Charleston Planning Commission. My name is Charlie Carish. I'm the chairman of the commission. I'm joined by Vice Chairman Harry Lassane, commission members Jimmy Bailey, Donna Jacobs, and Sunday Lempesis, and we appreciate you all coming tonight. And Ms. Harrison, Erica Harrison's here, so thank you, Erica, for being here. Hope you didn't get too wet getting here, too. So I appreciate y'all. Feet are dry. I appreciate y'all struggling to get here. I know what needs to. So anyway, let me explain the way the meeting process will work. I'll read an item from the agenda into the record. Then we'll hear from staff regarding the item and any recommendation they have. Then we'll hear from the applicant. Then we'll hear from anybody in favor of the application. Then we'll hear from anybody that may be opposed to the application. Then we'll give the applicant to respond to anybody who's opposed. After that time, we'll close the public aspect of the meeting, and the commission members will ask questions, discuss, make motions, and move forward. I'd ask anyone that has a cell phone to turn on silent. We don't have a tremendous crowd tonight. Turn on silent or shut it off, and I'll do that myself so I don't forget. And I'd ask Mr. Morgan to let us know if there's any changes to the agenda and introduce the planning staff that's going to be presenting tonight.
Okay, thank you. I'm Christopher Morgan, planning manager here at the city. Philip Clapper, our clerk, is here, helping with the minutes. Jim Hemphill, who is our new planning commission liaison with our staff, is here. He is in our planning department. He's been here for a couple of years, but he's now going to be exclusively working with you all. And then that's all our staff who's going to be here tonight for the meeting. Oh, Molly Jones, our annexation coordinator, is attending as well.
Great. We put pressure on her all the time. So. And no changes to the agenda is printed out.
We've got the planned unit development at Battery Island that is deferred.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. I'd also ask that if you come up to speak tonight, that you step up to the podium, tell us who you are, if you represent someone, and your address, if you would. Thank you. The first item on the agenda, first of all, is the minutes. And they were emailed out to commission members. And one thing that wasn't in the minutes, but that's okay, was just at the last meeting, Mr. Lassane wasn't feeling well. We wished him well to get better pass, so he's here. So that's the only thing. It's no big deal. Is there a motion that we get to approve the minutes? Go ahead. You have a change?
I don't believe I was in attendance at the June meeting.
Okay. Did it show you in attendance?
It says commission members, present commission members, Eric Harrison.
Okay. So that, if we modify that, so Donna, you want to make a recommendation? You want to make gosh, you made 3 motions. No. Donna, were you making a motion to change with the adjustment, Ms. Harrison?
Yes.
Okay,
I'll
great.
second that.
Second by Ms. Lempesis. Any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's a unanimous vote. First item on the agenda is rezoning. It's number 1471 Folly Road, Signal Point, James Island, TMS number 334000002345552. Approximately 0.30 acres. Request rezoning from limited business shall be to general business. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a property a little bit further down Folly Road. I believe it's a little bit south of Fort Johnson. And it is a site that is, or actually maybe it is more than Fort Johnson, I'm sorry. It is a site that is in an area that's kind of quasi-industrial. You all may have heard reference to the Signal Point Industrial Park, and that's kind of to the east and north of this site. The request is to rezone from the current limited business to general business. Just to orient you, there are some other parcels around here. I'm showing with my cursor out. Oh, my cursor's not showing on here. Here we go. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. So there are parcels here that are zoned GB to the south and to the north. The eastern side of Folly Road is a little bit more residential here, but the western side is the light industrial and then the commercial zoning. So the GB request would not be alien to the surrounding area. The future land use from the comprehensive plan shows this as kind of part of this signal point industrial area. So it is designated for industrial. GB would be closer to industrial than LB would be. So that was one of the reasons we felt comfortable with the request. The property is vacant at present. Again, it's got some other vacant areas to the south. Here's an image of it at present. And to the right of the property, here's a comparison of general business to limited business. Of course, from a residential standpoint, general business has a little bit more density. It also allows 24-hour day type of uses as opposed to limited business being more 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. and a little bit less residential density. So those are some of the key differences between the two. And our recommendations for approval on this one based on the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Is the applicant with us today? They got held up in the weather. Is anyone, let me ask, would anyone like to speak in favor or in opposition to this request? Instead, we'll close the public aspect of this. Discussion, comments, motion.
Mr. Moore, you have any thing you can share with the commission about what the proposed use is or the motivation behind the rezoning?
It was a small kind of office warehouse is what they wanted to build there that didn't really fit within the limited business. I think they had some degree of office, but then they had some roll-up doors that they wanted to have there as part of it. It will have to go through our design review board, so the aesthetics of it will be taken into account, but it just didn't really fit for them within LB zoning.
And when you say office warehouse, that's not like a storage unit kind of?
No, they were not proposing that. And even in GB, they would have to have mixed use in the building to have commercial storage.
Okay.
And it's a really small site,
Yeah.
it's only a third of an acre, so
Right.
we haven't ever seen a storage thing go on that small a site.
Yeah, and this is, I've just asked this to ask it, it's consistent with the Folly Road overlay.
Yes, it would be consistent with that.
Okay. I move we approve it.
Great. Mr. Lassane moves for approval. Mr. Bailey seconds. Any other questions or comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Let the record show that unanimous support for item number 1 passes. Item number 2, rezoning 6640 King Street, downtown Peninsula, TMS number 4600404028, approximately 0.1 acres. Talk about a small little piece. Request rezoning from general business GB to mixed use workforce housing MU2 WH. Mr. Morgan.
From one small piece of property to another one. This one happens to be immediately adjacent to the overpasses for the Crosstown Septima Clark Parkway bridges as they head up to I-26. It is an older single house here. Its request is to go from the GB at present to the MU2 WH, which you find on the properties to the rear and to the north. This is an area of King Street. It's north of Line Street, but it is a historic property here. It is in our city center, so that is an area that we typically look for when we're recommending for our MU to WH. It is the most intense category in the city that has the greatest levels of intensity and heights. Here's the on it, applicant's representative is here now, here's an aerial image of the property, and the overpass is immediately adjacent over here. This is a view from the street. It's traditional kind of Charleston single that's been modified a little bit, but it's got that southern porch exposure there, and then it's got more commercial uses to the south. This is an image of the buildings to the south that have office and some residential in them. And our recommendation based on the comprehensive plan is for approval of this request.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Is the applicant here? Yes, sir. Would you like to say anything? Tell us, come on up to the podium if you would tell us who you are and.
Thank you. Neil Stevenson, representing the potential owner. This was really a feasibility study to see, for the owner to see if he would like to buy the property. he owns the property behind this, on Line Street, which is also zoned MU. And, light of all the development coming in behind it, he would like to develop this property that's kind of more keeping what's behind him, more so than what's, I guess on King Street. It's more of a transition. So, anyway, I think that, that property is really probably gonna become a little more intense than, and then it will enable the, historic building to be renovated.
This piece is a small little parcel, obviously.
Yes, but the, and all the parking and the rest of the needs for that property on the piece of property that he owns now.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
That's a question for Mr.
Yes,
Stevenson.
sir.
Would you be abandoning that property line and making it one property?
Most likely, yes.
Okay.
Ms. Bailey?
Did I hear you say that the intent is to restore the existing structure?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak in favor of the application? Is anyone in opposition to the application? If not, that'll close the public aspect. Commission members, Mr. Bailey?
Before hearing any of the details, I looked online at the picture and thought, what a shame to lose that house. But I also felt like no one would probably ever live there as a single family resident. So I'm very pleased to hear that plan to incorporate a renovation of that building into whatever their plan is. And so but I'd make a move for
Okay,
approval.
great. We still discussed Ms. Jacobs.
I'll second that,
Great.
because I had the same thoughts, I looked at the picture going, heck, oh my God, if that's,
More power to
This
you.
is subject to being
if that's the intention to incorporate it into a larger thing, but respect that building, that would be really sweet right there. So I'll second.
There's a
Mr.
motion by
Bailey.
Mr. Bailey, a second by Ms. Jacobs. Any other questions or comments?
Well, understand that we've just been told that that's gonna happen.
Well,
So,
Right.
but, and either way, I understand it, it's just,
I know, I'm with both of y'all on that, and that's my concern. That's why I asked about abandoning the property line to see if there's gonna be a connection there.
BAR does have
BAR's
jurisdiction
got
it.
over this.
Yeah, let's say.
It's never tear this down to
To build.
demolish.
right, it's not,
That's
it's not
the
an
structure.
absolute, but
Mr.
it's still,
Stevenson
thank
knows
you
that, I
for
know.
hearing an intention.
But, and I think the thing about it is that on that side of, when you look at what's on the other side, the overpass, where, you see all those buildings, they have mixed use, but they've been readapted. So, where the daily is and the intake store, so, but also we know that the low line is gonna be right there. So I think the intensification, I think that's just gonna be a place where people are going to start to cluster. And, you're gonna see, other types of businesses and people, but uses. And so I think the density, the additional density, all the incentives, and also we know that this might help our affordable housing fund.
Thank you.
So-
Susan.
So you've already seconded, so I'll support this application.
Great, thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Bailey, second by Ms. Jacobs. If no other questions or comments, all in favor of the application, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition, it's unanimous vote, passes. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, for being with us. Great. I talked to Mr. Morgan. We're gonna take probably 3 and 4 separately, and hopefully 5, 6, and 7 together. Is that right, Mr. Morgan? Can we do that?
4, 5, 6, and 7 are all immediately contiguous. in the
Okay.
same house
So we'll
next
take
to
3
them.
separately, and then we can take the others.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm gonna recuse on 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7,
Okay.
because our company owns property right adjacent, and we sold 313.
Great. Thanks.
So,
Process for that, Mr. Morgan, is she just sign a form, she can stay with us, so can't she? Or-
I don't have anything.
Okay, we'll get you a form to sign. Yeah, we'll get her one, we'll get you one for that. So I'm gonna read into the record, item number 3, which is 179 and 181 Fitchburg Street, west side. And that's what's the EMS number? Does she need to,
Do I-
when you recluse, does she need to leave?
It typically
Okay.
is.
All right.
But can't we just take her one and then take the other one?
Well, she's not reclusing on all of them, I believe.
Yeah, I would,
She just said-
because,
Yeah.
yeah, because we,
Okay.
yeah, because we own the street on.
She's gonna leave us now.
I'll be back.
You gotta
We're
go
gonna
back.
call you
But I'm
back.
gonna go outside.
179, 181 Fitchburg Street, West Side, Peninsula, TMS number 4600702 173 175 242.238. This request for zoning from 2.5-story Old City Height District to 3-story Old City Height District. Mr. Morgan.
So yeah, as you all probably see, we have a number of these requests in this west side neighborhood to go from the 2.5-story to 3-story Old City Height District. So we'll go through here. We've got some imagery for each of these locations, as well as a kind of map that shows you the overall neighborhood and the relationship of the height districts in the overall neighborhood. To orient you to this site, we've got Ashley Avenue just to the west, Fishburne Street running east-west at the property front zones. There is a there is a older church on the property that was recently at BAR for demolition approval, and it was denied demolition approval. It's that structure. Here, there may be a portion of the structure that BAR allowed for demolition, but I think the bulk of the structure was going to have to stay. It is in the west side neighborhood. It is in the midst of a large swath of the city that is this 2.5-story height district, and this is a kind of map of all these requests in the area, and where the 2.5-story heights are limited. Everything that is in this kind of tealish gray color is the 2.5 height district, and the 2.5-3 is across the crosstown in the Cannonboro, Elliottboro area over here. The request is to go to just the basic 3 height district here. The property is in, based on the comprehensive plan, our neighborhood district. So, the base zoning and all that is in line with what you would expect in a neighborhood district. So there's not really an issue from that standpoint. But we do have some concerns about the heights in this area because of the context and the precedent that would be set. Just further aerials to give you a sense of where it is and how these properties relate to other properties nearby. This is kind of a good image of the site. The subject property is here in the middle. You can see there's a cursor. It's this vacant lot that's here. There's a 2-story house to the east of it. The church that was up at BAR is right here. And then there's some other buildings that we'll see in some subsequent slides. This is the church right here. Building to the west, excuse me. This is a building to the east that was recently renovated. It's elevated, I guess, 3 or 4 feet, excuse me. And is a single-story structure immediately adjacent, so that's a recent renovation there. Across the street are some other recent structures. The corner of Ashley Avenue is over here to the left. There is a 2-story structure right there, then a 2.5 or so story structure immediately adjacent to that, and then a 2-story structure here in brick, and then a elevated, somewhat recent 2-story structure here. So you get a sense of the type of elevation that's required for current flood zone requirements. This 3 or 4 foot elevation that has been going on around here across the street and on the property that was here immediately to the eastern side of it as well. So our staff recommendation is not for this height zoning change because we feel it sets a precedent that is not appropriate in this area when you look at the context of the entire height district, that these would be anomalies within the neighborhood. And we feel that building to the current flood zones as exhibited by other recent renovations in the area is more appropriate, and just having the 2.5 story from that standpoint still gives room for building a good sized house that would be in keeping with the surrounding area, but does not create something that would be out of scale with the neighborhood, and that's why we're.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Is the applicant here?
I am.
Great. Would you come on up and tell us who you are? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Everybody.
Good. How are you?
My name is Mike Levine. I'm the contract holder. on this piece of land and the church. At 179, as Christopher mentioned, Mr. Morgan mentioned, is a church over 100 years old, discovered. We met with the VAR. We're moving forward with the plan of adaptive reuse for that church. Next to it's and we have about a quarter acre surrounding that where we're going to put up residential structures. In our plan, we're going to raise the church per FEMA guidelines, provide under structure parking. We'd like to do the same thing with the residences. I think one of the critical points here is that this rezoning does not grant us a higher height. It's a half story. So it allows us to enclose our third story and then use our first story to provide under house parking. And because of where the FEMA guidelines are right now and the Charleston codes, we need to build over 6 feet in order to provide this parking. So in that vein, in order to go forward with the project and provide off-street parking, which is critical to the neighborhood, we're requesting this rezoning.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. We appreciate it.
There is actually one more thing.
Yes, sir.
I will say there is precedent for this rezoning in the neighborhood. About 3 or 4 months ago, the board approved at 228 President Street, the same height rezoning from 2.5 to 3 for about 14 homes. Also in the west side, same concept, same reasoning. So I appreciate if you take that into account when you vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is someone like to speak in favor of the application? Yes, sir.
Distinguished members of the commission, staff, I'm Jason Taylor, Vice President of the West Side Neighborhood Association. I just received a text. I plan to be with our president, Audrey Lisbon, who also lives adjacent to this property, and to voice our opinion that there is no disapproval from the neighborhood, or we support the 3 feet. And there's 2 reasons. Our neighborhood has been plagued by flooding and parking issues. This is responsible development, and within the city guidelines, the developers may go up to 40 feet. This is staying below 40 feet, but leaving some of our drainage issues by having pervious materials, drainage basins, catch basins. Also, we'll have parking, which we'll get into on another project that's very similar. That the very fact that our president of the neighborhood association lives adjacent does not oppose this and is one of the more affected individuals. She's stuck from her job flooding, leaving the VA. And she sent me a text to confirm that. But we are in support of the 3 feet with the understanding that all these projects are subject to normal setbacks and everything like that, and they aren't going to exceed the 40 feet that are allowed generally in the city of Charleston in this district. The idea is to move parking away from the street, alleviate 2 of our major principles, lack of parking and lack of drainage, and this seems to be sustainable development and a very good way to use the space. They're going to reutilize the church, preserving its historic quality, and benefit our neighborhood by removing what has been a piece of urban blight. This property has been known for having rats. It's going to be undeveloped under these circumstances, and they aren't exceeding that 40-foot cap by doing this. They're merely making up the difference for the FEMA code and what's best for the interest of our neighborhood, which is to have developments move parking off of the streets, remove the congestion of vehicles, and beautify our neighborhood, plus recognize the issue of drain water. And as far as precedent goes, we've shown a bunch of other ones that we've heard of other ones. I would like to point out 315 Ashley, which is a 50-foot monstrosity, which will be coming up on our next one. This is a project that takes into consideration the aspects of the neighborhood, the general height of the neighborhood, follows that height, and is going to preserve the church itself for a dwelling and a couple of other dwellings that will significantly beautify this abandoned property, and the neighborhood from the president and myself support. However, there was a vote, and there will be individuals speaking in opposition. But I'm here as the vice president of the West Side neighborhood. The fact is that this issue was deferred because there's confusion about you're asking for 3 feet when it's essentially you can get the same height out of the 2.5 feet. The difference is there are dormers in space. And there was some confusion on that, and I think it's really complicated when we're disseminating this to a large amount of people in our neighborhood and those few in attendance. So we are here as the executives, and Audrey herself, who once again is an affected property directly adjacent to it, to give our support for this kind of project going forward. And maybe we may encourage City Council to review this, considering FEMA, our parking, and is this the best plan going forward to continue without bothering you guys for a mere 3 feet when it doesn't exceed the height?
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Anyone else like to speak in favor of the application? Anyone like to speak in opposition to the application? Yes, sir. Come on up. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Marcus Williams, and as the Vice President alluded to is about the confusion. The confusion that always comes in when someone tries to push something on us in the West Side Neighborhood Association that they really hasn't approached us in the right manner as to what they're doing. They give us no specs. They give us no pictures to tell us the design they're gonna do. They come in with a piece of paper, and a piece of paper doesn't do anything for me. I live on the West Side neighborhood. I live on Noonan Street. And when I turn this corner here, I don't see the same thing that my vice president sees or the president of the association sees. I see this 2.5-foot building that should go up if it's gonna be 2.5 foot. Why would they want to have 3 when zoning had already said that they had a limitation to 2.5? And we had just left out of the height restriction a couple years ago. So why is it that they want to come now and add another third story to this particular project that they're trying to propose to you? I and the members that I was in the meeting was we didn't approve of anything. So I don't know how my vice president got that information, because I was one of the ones that opposed, and we had a deadlock. And that's the reason why I'm opposing, because if you're on a deadlock, that means we don't have enough information to go for him to go forward. And I would like to state my point is that I don't think you should do it.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Anyone else in opposition to the application? Mr. Lawrence, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine,
Good.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members and city staff. My name is Arthur Lawrence, and I'm a community activist. And I also was the president of the West Side Neighborhood Association of over 30 years. I had worked in this community from 1960 up to this day as an activist, and to make sure that the residents who don't have a voice, we speak for them. And we had people to participate and to make the phone calls and everything, something that they're against it. And at the meeting, I was there. And in any meeting, the body have to make a motion. The president and the vice president cannot make a motion from the head. They are here today against the will of the people to support this, and I don't think it's right. Now, being an activist for this community, development of Spring Street corridor, we had a hand on it. Bristol, we had a hand on it. The West Edge, we had a hand on it. The Joe Riley's baseball stadium, a hand on it. The National Guard Armory had a hand on it. And working with the city to make sure that we have the flooding problem solved with the Spring Street, Fishburne Street, the Cooper River Bridge, we had a hand on it under my administration for this West Side Neighborhood Association. Working closely with the city to make sure that we have quality of life for those individuals that living in the Freeman cottages that the city is proud of. Now, I'm gonna back up a little later on when there's other issues that come up. Now, they created this monster somehow in the West Side. And we tried to fight against it at 315, but some way it changed. But the city looked down the road and saw that this would be a problem to kill our neighborhood, to allow these monster homes to come into a community and disrupt the quality of life in this community. And this was happening. People are using it as a gold mine and they don't live in the community, and it is using for investment purposes only. Now, when the city saw this maximum height was taking place, city council came up with an ordinance across the board saying 2.5 story, period. Medical district, this edge, they're only the height district in this particular area. The only area is enough to take advantage of the senior citizens that are living in these treatment cottages and living in this community. So we hope that you turn and deny this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Commissioners. Cashin Hurley with Historic Charleston Foundation, 40 East Bay Street. HCF is opposed to agenda item 3, the rezoning request from 2.5 to 3 stories. We just don't believe 3 stories is appropriate for the residential West Side neighborhood. Ordinance section 54-30615 empowers the Planning Commission to review requests to rezone to a higher height district on the content of the property, the character of the immediate area, street widths around the property, and whether the requested rezoning will be compatible with surrounding properties. The Commission adopted this language in 2020 and it was approved by City Council. The property in question is located on a residential street, surrounded by buildings ranging from 1 to 2.5 stories. And after a careful study of the surrounding properties, using the evaluation criteria in the ordinance, we have concerns about scaling and compatibility with existing neighborhood buildings and the character of the neighborhood. This is just too much for these lots. We agree with Mr. Morgan on establishing an unfortunate precedence and respectfully encourage the Commission to deny this application.
Thank you, Ms. Foley. Anyone else? Ms. Carroll, we know who you are, but tell us who you are for the record.
And Catherine Carroll, the Preservation Society of Charleston. Like our colleagues at HCF, the Preservation Society is opposed to this request of zone to a 3-story height district. We would also like to point Commission members to section 54-306, which has already been quoted tonight, so I'll skip that. But Fishburne Street is overwhelmingly comprised of 1 to 2.5 story buildings, and there are several examples of elevated historic buildings and new construction within the context that respect the scale of the historic streetscape. While the Preservation Society is supportive of preserving the historic building for continued use, the church building, we are confident that this rehabilitation and any associated new construction can be achieved within the current zoning. Further, we feel it's important, as the neighborhood mentioned, to uphold the integrity of the height districts that were very specifically and intentionally drawn in this area to respond to the existing context. So we support city staff's position this evening and ask that the Commission recommend approval of this request.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. Appreciate it. Anyone else like to speak in opposition to the application? If not, would the applicant like to respond? Any concerns? Thank you, sir.
Regard to the height districts, a new datum was put in place, I believe, 2 years ago, which actually impacted what qualifies as a story. So when the neighborhood associations were able to instill this 2.5 story height limit in the neighborhood, okay, at that point, you were able to build 2.5 stories without being impacted by the FEMA data. When the new FEMA maps went into effect last year, it actually moved your elevations. So our elevations went from, for an example, what was once 6.5 feet, I could build 5.5 feet, wouldn't count as a story. The data moved, so now that 6.5 feet is actually 5.5 feet. So I have to build 6.5 feet to get to my FEMA guideline. I lose a story. So while there was a 2.5 height story limit put into place, I believe the new datum should actually, in effect, change the story limit. I will also say we've met with both historical societies. We've met with the VAR, and I'm actually a little surprised, hearing both women speak. We've been working hand in hand with the VAR, and while we haven't spoken recently to the Historic Society, we did meet with them on site, and we have plans, but this was the first step. We're trying to revitalize a church and rehab a church who needs the money to move to North Charleston. I mean, that's in effect what we're doing. And we've been trying to work with the city and the neighborhood. I met many neighborhood residents over the course of weeks, months. We're just trying to put up a product that the neighborhood will be happy with. We really are here to do something people are going to like. We're not greedy developers. That seems to be a key term these days. We want to put up residences. We want to, as called, use an adaptive reuse for the church and put something we're going to be proud of. I live in Charleston. I mean, I've lived here for 3 years. I'm new to town, but I love it. I live down the block from there, and I want to be proud of the project. So it's not our impact to change the fabric of a neighborhood. It's just to put an effective project which has off-street parking that everyone wants. There'll be new infrastructure for flooding, which will help everybody. And, given the new data, I think it's something that would behoove the committee to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Let me ask you a question. I know you met with the different historical societies. Did you meet, and you met with different neighborhood association members? Did you meet with the organization as a whole, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I met with the organization as a whole.
Great.
I've met with the president separately. I've met with many different neighborhood members.
Okay.
When we were working on the church project. That was, and then again, the height.
No, thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Lee. Thank you. Appreciate it. So there's a lot of challenges in it. Got to close the public aspect of this. Sir, we really were closing the public aspect. What did you want to speak about? I'm
I
sorry.
wanted to speak, I'm also a builder, so I wanted to say
Well,
more about the technical details.
Yeah, we'd have to be honest with you, sir, if we open it back up, then I'd have to give the applicant a chance to speak again too, so it causes a little confusion. So I wish you would have raised your hands earlier, but we really have closed the public aspect unless you think my commission members would. I'm sorry, but thank you for understanding. Got to close the public aspect of this. Commission members, questions, comments, motions?
I have a question. How are we addressing, in the west side, how we raise these houses for parking underneath? Because that is going to impact the 2.5 stories, which 2.5 stories is simply, it's kind of an arbitrary when you start adding in the floodplain, which has changed, and plus our changing to 2 feet. So how do we address any of the homes there that need to get raised over time?
So essentially the parking zone, if it's 6 feet or higher, that counts as a story then.
Right.
Okay, so the park unders would typically count as a story.
So 6 feet is
So
what
then
you're.
you would be left with a story and a half of usable space in those instances.
What can you really do with a half a story? I'm just curious.
50% of what you can do with a full story. So let's say you do 1,000 square feet on one story, you can do 500 square feet on the second floor.
And what's an average house for the footprint on there? I'm just curious how much that is.
In the west side,
Yeah, right in the
They're
neighborhood we're talking about.
typically smaller. I think these are probably 1,000, 1,800 square foot houses. Some of the newer ones are bigger, but the historic ones, the Freedman's cottages, things like that, I think are not super
They've got to
big.
be like 20 feet wide, possibly.
Probably 20 by 50 or
Yeah,
so.
I'm
something like that.
just curious how we're addressing parking and flooding at the
And
same
parking,
time.
there were a couple of confusing statements made about parking. Parking always has to be off street. Always has to be off street. Whether they park it under the building or beside the building or behind the building, they will have to provide the parking on the site. It might eat into how many units they can build, but the parking has to be off site.
Do we know how many parking spaces this project is
This is
requested?
It's 0.23 acres.
No, but how many parking lot spaces?
I don't know how many houses they want to build. We haven't seen any
Oh,
site
okay, so
plan, but they'd have to do 2 spaces per house.
Okay.
So be they under the house
So
or
2
be
spaces
they
or
adjacent to it or something like that.
Are they doing any residual parking? Do we know?
I have no idea. We haven't seen a site plan. So,
Thank you, Ms. Hutchins. Ms. Lassane?
Mr. Morgan, I had a question. There was mention of a 40-foot height limit in addition to the 2.5 story height limit. Is there such a thing?
Technical discussion about that in the ordinance, and I didn't bring my copy of the ordinance down here with me, but essentially, when we went to height by stories,
That's what I
there was a
thought.
lot more flexibility. You could do like a 12-foot story, you could do a 10-foot story, that kind of thing. But in the overall sum of the height, I don't know if our preservation folks have a copy of the ordinance with them since I didn't
Based
bring
on
mine.
the right of way.
But I'm sorry,
It's based on the right of way.
based on the right of
So
way.
you're capped at 40
Yeah,
feet.
yeah.
Even if you have 2.5 or 3 stories, you're still capped.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even with parking underneath, it's
Yeah.
still capped at 40?
So say you did a 6 or let's just say 7 feet for parking underneath, a foot between the stories, so that's 8 feet. Then a 10-foot first story, so you're at 18, and then another full story, so you are at let's see, call it
Yeah, my
27, and then you go up. So yeah.
Okay. Just like the half story of it has always kind of been a little, and I recognize the roof line needs to have some, if you do higher, your roof line uses a lot, but it's just a half story with elevated parking is just challenging. I mean, so.
I agree.
Members, questions, comments, Ms. Jacobs, you look like you're about to say something. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It looked like my head's.
Well, you don't have to.
Well, this is one of these, as I think Bill Moody stated it as conguliums. That's was the.
As a what?
Congulium, that's what he called. Conflicting information.
Or conundrum.
Don't ask me to define it, I just define it. This is a situation where, my question was, when was the 2.5 story requested by the neighborhood based on redevelopment? How long have we
Well,
done?
that was part of our overall height change throughout the downtown.
Right,
And then as we had discussions with various neighborhoods, when we had discussions with the west side, they said that they felt better about
but
it.
what was the date of that?
I believe it was in the 2017 time range.
Correct.
Yeah. And part of it was because there had been a kind of recent spate in the early 2010s, 20-teens, in that neighborhood of some what we call, they got the name rocket houses that went up to 3.5 stories. There were some houses that go up almost 4 stories in that area. And in the subsequent presentation, you'll see some of those images because they're closer to the other properties that are up for consideration.
So I have friends that live in this area, so I'm there quite a bit, and I do see this development where they're just trying to, like you say, you call it rocket, cram them in. And this is where my concerns come in, is one, we're getting ready to do a zoning code rewrite. We did a city plan based on water, but we have a neighborhood that strongly feels how they want their neighborhood to look and feel. So I'm concerned that we're piecemealing this without a comprehensive look at the neighborhood based on all the new data, all the new FEMA maps, the city plan, facing a zoning code rewrite. And we're going to snaggletooth the area without a comprehensive look. And we're right on the cusp of a zoning code rewrite. So I hesitate to do anything to this neighborhood until they've really been engaged to say, how do we want to see our neighborhood moving forward in light of all these concerns? Because this area is right for people to come in and do all kinds of things and override the concerns of the neighborhood and the character of that neighborhood. And I live in such a neighborhood, so I'm very sensitive to that. So with all that stated, I'm gonna make a motion to support staff's denial at this time. I think it's something we can all relook at as we move forward with zoning code rewrite and really get the neighborhood engaged in what that's gonna mean moving forward. So I'm gonna make a motion to support staff's recommendation.
So there's a motion to deny by Ms. Jacobs. Other questions, comments? Second.
I've already spoken, so I'll let anybody else go that wants to.
Well, one thing I'd like to say is this is a tough situation. We know because it's, as Ms. Lempus has said, it's tough to fit it in, tough for you to do something. I appreciate the fact that they want to keep the look of the church. I was telling Mr. Stain, I hate losing these. The church has already decided to move. I can't say it's not a financial, they need to do financial. I just hate to lose these churches, but at least I'd love to see the same buildings downtown. My synagogue's talking about the same thing. Do we move? And I said, and it's just a tough situation, but I hate to see it. I think it changes the whole beauty of the city of Charleston and some of these churches, whether they're practice churches, but at least the building would be there the way it is. So
I look at that map that's on the screen now that has everything in that teal color. And I listened to Ms. Jacobs' comments and learned a new word, congrulium.
She takes
I'm
good
gonna
credit.
Google that one.
No, I don't think there's a spelling or a definition. You have to talk to Bill Moody.
But I think if there is a broader problem created by new information, then it'll get dealt with in a broader way. I second and support Ms. Jacobs' motion.
Thank you. So there's a motion by Ms. Jacobs, second by Ms. Bailey. Mr. Lassane, do you have something?
Yeah, I'm, as usual, Ms. Jacobs and I think very similarly, and that was, my
That's
thought
fair.
was exactly like she said, and that is, just like Mr. Bailey just said, to make kind of an ad hoc exception to, a rule that we just put in place. I support the density that you're talking about putting in the neighborhood. I think all of us want to see more housing built. I feel highly confident that you'll do a great job. But I'm not comfortable with, with making an exception to a rule we just put in place. I think the new information that you've talked about requires us to adjust and to look at making a policy change in this neighborhood, but I'm not comfortable supporting a kind of one-off exception.
And see, I'm conflicted on this one just because I hear exactly what the applicant has to say. I don't agree with piecemealing it, but I also think we have to weigh the fact of putting someone on hold indefinitely with their plans. So I do think it is a conundrum, or a conundrum, and I'm real torn about it for that reason.
And I was just going to finish by saying, I think that the comments that we heard from the neighborhood show that the neighborhood has not come to a consensus on this, and that they deferred this question. So at a minimum, I think we should defer this until the neighborhood has at least understands this issue and has taken a stand on it, taken a position one way or the other. But I will support Ms. Jacobs' motion, and I think.
So there's a motion to deny by Ms. Jacobs, second by Mr. Bailey. Other questions, comments?
So you did not want to defer, is what, that was
No, there's
confused.
already a motion on the floor, so yeah. All in favor of Ms. Jacobs' motion to deny, signify by saying aye. 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 Anyone opposed?
Nay.
So is 4 in favor of the motion to deny, 2 in opposition. So the motion to deny is approved. The next items, and we're going to take the next few together. Item number 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I'm going to read them all to the record. 4 is 313 Ashley Avenue, Westside Peninsula, TMS number 46007 0200053, 0.13 acres, requested zoning from the 2.5 to 3-story height district. Number 5 is 0 Orrs Court, Westside Peninsula, TMS number 46007 02071. 0.07 acres, requested zoning from 2.5 to 3-story height district. Number 6 is 18 Orrs, TMS number 46007 02070, 0.06 acres, same thing, 2.5 to 3-story height district, Old City Height District. Number 7 is 20 Orrs, West Side, TMS number 46007 02069, 0.13 acres, requested zoning from 2.5 Old City Height District, 3-story Old City Heights District. Before we get going, I do want to thank Ms. Johnson. She deserves she's been in traffic for about an hour
I'm
trying
so
to get here,
sorry.
so we
Yeah.
appreciate you being here, though. I know I've been getting emails from her saying I'm still here.
I was on the bridge for a long time.
Send me a life raft or something. So anyway, so thank you for being here. Mr. Morgan.
And bear with me, we've got these separately listed, so I'm going to go through a number of different slides, but a general idea because some of them repeat themselves. So this is start with the 313 Ashley, which is just around the corner from the ones you all just saw. The ones you just saw were over here. This is a little bit up the street, and it's in the middle of a block that is DR2F. The same image is here. Here's the subject property. Plan is the same on this. It's the neighborhood recommendation. Here's an aerial image of this subject property. Here is an image of the properties between this house. It's a kind of a two-story house, and then this house, which was built before our 2017 regulations. This, to me, looks like it's a 4-story because the fourth story would have to be 50% of the third story to be called a 3.5. So I think this is what we would call today a 4-story, but it was built under the old height limits, which were based on feet. So it's immediately adjacent to the north. And then we've got some other images that show what's around. This is to the south, another 2-story house here, and then a commercial structure that's 1 story on the corner. And then to the north, again, you see this large structure here. Then there's a 1-story structure here that's in yellow, a 2-story structure here, and then it looks like this structure, which was brought in and elevated to meet the current standards. So you see how much lower that is than the park under level. This was elevated, I think, about in 2016 or so, something like that. And it's a 2 or 2.5 story structure. I think I see some dormers back there. So, and then other 2-story structures as you make your way up the block. Across the street, this structure was just elevated in the last year. So again, you see what the level structures have to come to meet the flood requirements. So this is meeting the FEMA requirements here across the street. It doesn't have enough room to park under, so that's why if you're going to park under it, you have to count it as a story. And then you see a structure to the left of that has not been elevated, but it still is a couple of feet off the ground here. And a sister structure immediately to the north. And then here are these 2 matching structures right here. And then a structure that's actually lower to the ground that's a 2-story structure here. And then another 2-story structure in there. And our recommendation, this one was the same as the previous ones. They're all for denial. Now I'll start moving through. And then here's the Orr's Court, 0 Orr's Court. Same situation, same general area, same map that we were looking at before, same city plan recommendation. The aerial here for the Orr's Court property. Here is the subject property. It's behind here, so it's behind an existing 1-story house here, and then a vacant lot to the right. There's a 1-story house to the north that is a very historic structure. It's elevated a little bit more than this one, which is a little bit more recent. I think it's a freedman's cottage here on the left. I don't know if this one's a freedman's cottage. There is the back of the middle school that's part of the Burke High campus. And you see some other 2- and 1-story structures as you go up onto Orr's Court. And again, our recommendation is denial on this one. Then we'll go to the next one, Orr's Court, which is the smaller building up front. Same map, same plan recommendations here. That's the very property right there. And then the same structure to the north, same street view in that direction. And then we have 20 Orr's Court, which is another vacant parcel. Same map here, same plan recommendation. And then site, and then there's the subject property that goes much deeper. You can see to the south of it is a 2-story structure that again meets the new FEMA requirements. It's not a full 6 feet up there to meet those requirements. It's probably missing since 5 feet or something like that. And then you see another structure that did create a park under. This again predates the 2.5-story limit, but we would call this structure that's in blue here, we would call this a 3-story structure today.
How high is that, Christopher?
I'm sorry?
How high is that structure? Just curious.
Just the number of feet?
Yeah, if you know.
I'm guessing this is probably 8 or 9 feet, and then 10, so let's say 19. I'm sorry, 38. Okay, that's a number I can make. So got that one, and again the property that's just to the north. So and then the street view. So this is the info, and then this is from the corner at Fishburne, and you can see a 1-story house at the corner of Fishburne and Orr's, and then this house that again we were saying is essentially 3 stories, 38 feet right here, and the other area. So that is the presentation on those properties together.
So what did you say about the 40 feet? Was that something that they
So that's a maximum, I guess, from the street level. You know, that's something that the BAR and our building department look at. These aren't under BAR jurisdiction, but it's a maximum that would have to come in when the plans are reviewed. From just a pure neighborhood planning standpoint, we look at it just from the story, so we say 2.5 or 3 or whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Levine, would you like to be heard?
Just-
Oh, I'm sorry, I just assumed, I'm sorry. Sorry, y'all come on up, sorry.
Okay. Good evening, y'all. Tom Richardson with Synchronicity. Also have with me Mr. Chamberlain Chestnut, who's developer and builder. As y'all know, we are downtown, we work downtown, we do a lot of small neighborhoods with attainable and affordable housing. We've been members of the West Side for many years, running our business. We've done several projects there, as well as Radcliffeboro, Kellyboro, Cannonboro, all throughout the East Side. And we deal with these a lot. I take more of the approach when I do these. I'm a land planner and landscape architect, and I come from a civil engineering firm background. So usually we are brought in to help solve engineering problems. And this site is very unique, although it was represented on a graphic grouped with the previous item. These are very different applications. So there's very different reasoning for why we are here. With my experience, I have been before this board specifically twice for elevation requests at 144 Cannon Street, as well as we were the applicant for 228 President Street, which was previously mentioned tonight. Both of those properties have elevations of 5 feet. This property has elevations of 4.5 feet. And the history of this is really important. So the plat for this property, which is included in our application, is handwritten from centuries ago. The way that this block was developed was done from the ends at the corners all the way down to these last parcels. As they were developed, they were higher and then they came lower. This is the lowest point, not only on this block, but in this sub-region. So we're dealing with obvious problems, and today couldn't be more of an exacerbated example of that as we all canoed to get over here. So that is something that on all of our projects downtown we deal with. And today was not a tidal flooding issue. Today was a cloudburst, rain event. And that's important to remember as well. So what we have here is we get trapped water. The city, and I don't know if y'all remember, but Ashley used to flood way worse until the city came in and fixed the storm drainage, and that was great to see. But that's higher than where we are, and it pitches lower to the back of these Orr's properties and the Ashley property. The other compounding issue is 315. When 315 was built, it was built higher, and there were some things that were not done as that application had intended. And so we have a drainage issue of water coming from 315. So if you can imagine, I'm 315 here, our neighbor is 311, and we're in the middle. So our goal was to help with the drainage solution there. We have to still meet the codes, and it's important to understand in this timeline that when the BAR was redone and the high district maps were redone, we were a part of that process. The 2.5 was granted for this district. We understand why. There, in the zoning code provision, in every height district, an applicant has the right to ask for the next appropriate level. In this 2.5, the next appropriate level is a 1/2 story up to a 3 story. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it does when you have to talk about the flood contentions. So the datum did change, as the previous applicant said a couple years ago. Along with that, we had FEMA flood map changes. So 2 of those things happened and changed the elevations. With this already being low, we're an AE 11 site. The city has a 2-foot freeboard. So we have to have finished floor elevation at 13. We have 4.5. Even to get up to that height, we have lost a story throughout the entirety of this aggregation. We're not trying to build monstrosities. I'm going to show you an example of what we've drawn for this that achieves a lot of goals in this solution, and it gives us a chance to put in effectively a small village of Hamlet, if you will, which is small homes that are attainable housing. We always take care of parking, and we also provide guest parking. So that's a big thing too. What we're gonna be doing, and I'll show you this example here. And this was presented to the west side, and we've talked to several folks about it. On top of this, 315 was originally, there was another building supposed to be built here at 313 with 315, and there's a legal shared driveway access that is still in place. So we have to honor that as well as we come up with a solution. So our goal was to come in, meeting the densities of DR2F, having units that have to be elevated. These are small units. They average 1,200 square feet. These are meager units. They carry parking below them. We honor our neighborhoods by getting as much parking over. With these units, we have to have 1.5 spaces per unit. We're parking them at 2 per unit. And we're providing up to 6 guest spaces throughout, which is way above any industry standard as a recommendation for guests in neighborhoods. So this whole drive here is a pervious paver geomat system that I developed with our team about 20 years ago. And we've used this all throughout downtown. It does a lot of things for us. It helps us meet all the technical requirements when we go through water quality and stormwater retention when we go through the TRC process, which this will be subject to. And it helps us capture the rain that's coming from 315. We get it down into this system, and we prevent it from crossing over and affecting the rear of 311, as well as crossing our site even further. So we're responsible to contain everything. Again, we've got an engineering solution that is really driving this, and we're also meeting a housing solution, which we desperately need downtown. So we also displayed the heights here, and our goal is all of these to have outdoor spaces with porches, to all the elevations to address the public realm and the right-of-ways. We've got a height example here. There is a cap because of the size of the right-of-way. We were still capped at 40 feet, but able to capture that half story makes a big difference because you actually have a livable floor. And you can just see as an example, we have a model height of 315, which exceeds this by over 10 feet compared to our rendered model here. So I just wanted to go through this. I'm happy to answer any questions. Every single one of these applications that we bring to y'all, we're very sincere and we're very deliberate with our requests. And I just want y'all to understand that we do a lot of work downtown. We bring a lot of stuff to y'all. We work on a lot of great projects. I don't just come here flippantly to ask for things. But we have been very familiar with this part of town. We said a good friend lived just a couple down. There's some taller houses. As they get built, they've addressed things before and after the code. And it is a sincere request. So I'm happy to answer any technical questions that y'all have.
The questions of the applicant. I had one quick question.
Sure.
To seek, sir. And I asked the other one to come out. You met with the different groups, the neighborhood associations?
Yeah, Mr. Chestnut presented to the west side.
Okay.
We also had conversations with several folks, technically offline.
Okay.
About it a lot.
Okay. No, I'm sure. Yes, sir. Mr. Chestnut, you go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I just
Thank you.
want
Thank
to
you.
bring something up real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
That with the elevation being at 4.5 feet, if the height zone is not granted, this project as it sits is basically unbuildable. Currently the homes are around just 1,200 square feet, very cute, smaller homes. If we have to go to a 1.5 story house, it puts the square feet at, I believe, 850 square feet per home. It's unbuildable. And then with the half stories, it comes like this. So it's like you're walking through an old Charleston single attic. The half story, all it does is just bring the walls out. The height is not going to change from the 3 story to a 2.5 story. If I build a 2.5 story house, my height would be 38 feet, is what these are drawn. If I build a 3 story house, my height is 38 feet. The general public is getting very confused about what a half story means. They think that I'm adding another story on top of what I have proposed, but really all it is bringing out the walls under the eaves. I had a similar project that I have at 228 President Street that I brought in front of the board for a similar issue. The grade there was also at 4.5 feet. and that project got approved for the additional height. So it does say in the code that we are allowed to ask for the next half story, which would be the 3-story. Like I said, I understand it's kind of a weird issue with the flood and zoning and everything, but with the current zoning, the way it reads, the project is totally unbuildable. And we hid every car underneath. I mean, accommodated the gentleman next door, gave him 2, 4, 6 extra parking spots for him with the shared easement to take care of his property and to take care of our property. His property was 50 feet tall. Ours is going to be 38. There's 2 humps down here that are around 40-ish feet as well. So it blends in very, very nice to the neighborhood. Now, on the blue sheet that he sent y'all that said 2.5 stories, many of those homes are 3, 3.5, or even 4 stories, but they just put the blue overlay showing that the new height is 2.5. So for instance, 315 Ashley was part of the 2.5, but it's actually a 4-story home. So I don't want to explain that blue to you. But without this height, the homes are unbuildable. I mean, it's a bad conundrum, but the height, and actually the city of Charleston, Charleston County, is talking about raising the freeboard even more to 4 feet, which was, this problem is going to come up almost every single time. And I kindly ask that you approve my project at 228 President Street. I kindly ask that we approve this based on the information that you've seen today.
Thank you, Mr. Chestnut. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Before we ask anybody, does any commission members have questions? Thank you both. Thank you. Anyone in favor of this application like to speak? Yes, sir.
Vice President Jason Taylor for the neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
Members of the commission and staff. Once again, we want to reiterate the responsible development of this and also the repair of existing issues made by poor development choices, such as the 50-foot monstrosity. And I know I have members of my community here. For the record, on the first project, the vote was a deferral. On this project, there was a no vote because of lack of quorum. So it's still in the air for the neighborhood. But I'm here on behalf of the president, myself, and many other members of the community who do not oppose this, not increasing the height past the 40 limit, but allowing to have the footprint stay the same and build out the second floor. We got garage, first floor, and then the second floor built out in the same footprint. This is logical, sustainable development that's rendering problems, particularly from 315. I've walked the neighborhood with my esteemed colleague, Mr. Lawrence. We had some concerns to discuss. We agreed that the blue house that you showed in the slide earlier was actually tantamount or the same size as this with the garage underneath it. And we looked at it and it was like, that's pretty good. This 50-foot monstrosity is not. And I would reiterate the same issues that I raised on the first one. Our concern too as a neighborhood is that if we don't allow this type of responsible development, you're going to find a developer to buy this property, build to minimum FEMA, put in 2 tandem parking spots, and completely continue the perpetuation of the problems that we've sought to work together to solve. And that comes to this confusion of this 2.5 feet. These are under 40 feet. They fit. It's not changing the footprint of the structure, merely giving more space. The permeable pavers, the catch basins, all of the work put into this is something that's going to benefit not just the west side, which I am a resident as well, but the entire city. There's going to have to go to the technical review committee, because one of the concerns that we discussed was the amount of traffic that this would increase with the amount of units, and they're going to have to go through technical review because there's kids walking around close to school. But this is another area where we're looking at swampland that's creating mosquitoes, which give us diseases. This is something that if we don't do responsibly and allow someone to engineer this, someone else is going to come in there and continue to perpetuate our problems of parking and lack of drainability on these projects. And again, the executive committee, we have no opposition to where everyone calls it a height restriction or a height granting. We're not granting them more height than 40 feet. We're going to allow them to blow out from the same footprint the second usable story and provide for parking. We have never seen a developer in my time in office that has come to us, as Mr. Chestnut has, with all setbacks accounted for, only required 15 parking spaces. with this little bit of height, is putting 26 total underneath it, is putting catch basins in to solve a heavily flooded area. There is no better project, and no more knowledgeable person has approached us asking for these things. And personally, the president and myself do not consider this a big ask. It's not that he's asking for 3 feet, he's asking to move walls out. He's under the 40 feet, and the surrounding properties, that blue house that we're looking at right here, this one is technically a little taller than his. It's at the 40 with a garage underneath it. Not to mention right over here, there's a 50-foot, 4-story house with party decks on top. So when we talk about the consistency of the neighborhood, this is creating a compatible consistency to deal with these issues that are, this individual here, I believe it was him, had an illegal pump from the swamp in his backyard running water to the street. This is the problem that we as citizens are dealing with, and we want to work with developers to beautify, better our city, and it will help alleviate existing problems by this, as we talked about, hodgepodge of issues. And we're merely asking, and I understand staff's position, they're selling this 2.5 story, but that's why we're here before the committee, that we're not asking for another story. That's the confusion where my esteemed colleagues and I do not agree on. It's not an extra story. Instead of this being dormers right here and making it more of a triangle space, it just blows up the wall and stays in the middle of the footprint. So it's not changing anything. Also, to point out, last night, or Tuesday night, city council's meeting, it was a wonderful discussion about BAR and the urban blight that we're dealing with on the east side, west side, and whether we should start considering, rather than letting demolition by neglect, does BAR have too much? This is not BAR, but I'm going back to the church issue, where they're not residents of the west side. They aren't dealing with the rats crawling out, the garbage, the loiterers, the people on the corner, the empty bottles, broken glass bottles, and lottery tickets. This is going to further our city in the best course possible and help all of us as residents, myself included, Madam President, and those residents that I love and spend time with discussing these issues. And we do need a cohesive plan, and we're looking for y'all. But in the meantime, there's no way we can deprive developers asking for this to make it financially feasible, to put in the pavers, to make it more environmentally beneficial and support the neighborhood. Otherwise, we're going to get more density built to a lower grade and tandem parking, and the streets will be overcrowded and flooding is going to continue. And that's why we respectfully, from the executive board of the West Side, ask that you reconsider city planning's position on this based on the surrounding structures available now, the benefit to the area, and the fact that this is not an elevation request, it's a store request, but it doesn't change anything fundamentally. And this will still have to go through technical review committee and other things as well. This is merely a first step. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, appreciate it. Anyone else in support of the application? Is anyone in opposition to the application? Yes, sir.
Once again, my name is Marcus Williams, and we have the same kind of issue again. Since he said that because we didn't have a quorum, but the quorum represents the West Side Neighborhood Association. So if you don't have a quorum, if you could not reach agreement then, we're not going to be able to reach agreement now. If you look at the 333 Ashley Avenue project, and you look at the one next to it, you see there is a height difference. But they failed to realize that they built that monstrosity, then all of a sudden the water that floods on Ashley Avenue, that water went over to Orr's Court, down behind the Mache's house, which is a Freeman cottage. Right now they got a pump going out from that water that's going from inside that little Freeman cottage. Now they got a pump that's running down through there to get that water out of there. So, and then if you go down the street, you just showed a picture where the height requirements for that one on Horse Court has parking underneath it for a 2.5-story building that's being built. So why are we fighting over something? All they have to do is come up with a better plan. Because I know he can figure it out. He's an architect, he should be able to figure something out to fit what the West Side neighborhood is operating with. Because eventually, that those that live there, and I've been living in my particular house for over 40-some years. And I'm still there. I don't have a problem with flooding. I live on Noonan Street. They think that my street that I live on is the auto mile. What that means is that I got more cars than I got people on that block. And when it floods, Noonan Street, where it hits my house, is the only way you're gonna get back to the interstate. Can't go to Pleasant Street, can't go down Fishburne Street, you can't go down Killing Street. All those streets are flooded. So they had to turn around and come back up Noonan Street to go back to the eye. What I'm telling you is that the more you build, the more you're gonna take away from us. And that's the problem. You're taking it away from the decorum and what the West Side has been operating on. The last footnote, the house I live in, my wife was born in. How many people can tell you today that they live in the house that their parents built? This to happen anymore. So I decided that I will make a stand. We talked in the meeting intensely. But when we left, you did not come up to me to ask me any other questions. That's a strange business that you operate on.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Anyone else in opposition, Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and board members and the city staff. This came before the board early on, and it was deferred. In any organization, you have to understand the Robert Rules of Order. And when associations don't understand the Robert Rules of Order, and individuals come to them wanting something from the community, this meeting, they said they held a couple of weeks ago. The president, vice president, tried to bring this motion to the body. I corrected them, say that y'all can't bring a motion from the head for the body. So they changed it, and they said that they met with the president, they met with the vice president. Just about everybody in the city knows me. And what they're trying to dump onto Osco is at my back gate in Osco. Now, based on what they're trying to dump traffic onto Osco. If you look at 321 Ashley Avenue, they tried to put a throughway on 321 Ashley Avenue. But the traffic and transportation stopped them, saying that you can't create a driveway from one street to the other and cause a problem on the school overlay zone. So they made them block it off. And that created problem in our school. When school is in, you can't find a parking space nowhere on Sumter Street, Osco, and Fishburne Street. And I live on Fishburne and Osco for over 74 years. And work in this community. I have experience in this community. And I had to work with some fantastic developers to make sure we have quality of life in this community. I live in here over 74 years and watch what's happening in this neighborhood. Now, 315 Ashland Avenue was a problem. It was developed before 1917. Okay? Now, when they developed 315 Ashland Avenue, they said, of course, to put a French drain that property. They did not do that. What they did, they just built a cement fence behind it, and they brought a whole lot of fill in and fill that property in and made it and elevate the property. And if you go by there and you've seen it, the water run down on this Freeman Cottage. The problem behind this Freeman Cottage. They created all this problem. Why do we, our elected officials, create laws and create ordinance if we're not gonna enforce it? And what they're trying to do is piecemeal this community until they get what they want. Now, we have to say, enough is enough. Especially our vice president and president is going in. But something have to change. And I'm gonna show you some things that what developers do in this community. They create this monster on Fishburne Street. Took away the crepe myrtles on the street. 4 crepe myrtle trees that Mayor Charleston, Joe Raleigh, and I, and other members of the community planted. They took away parking space, took away parking space on the street. We could not find out who was the developer, who gave them authority to cut down the trees on Fishburne Street. No signs were placed saying they were gonna have a zoning change or anything. And if anybody in the city know me, they know that I was researching and trying to find out what the problem is so that we can solve the problem, but we couldn't find anything out. Now, this monster, I know you saw it. This monster, creating all the problems. And we can't have another monster on the other side of it. Because that Freeman Cottage will be behind that house. And that Freeman Cottage be overshadowed. Just like this Freeman Cottage behind 315. Can't see the light or day for that monster. And if you look again at what's taking place in this community, poor Freeman Cottage. How do that look? And if you're living in that Freeman Cottage and that monster on the side of your house, but the city created ordinance to protect the poor citizens that live in this area. The zoning sign, and they said they're gonna create parking underneath these houses. I can tell you from experience, I live in this community, and 19 cars are parked in the front of this monster because the people who rent these apartments can't afford to pay the rent by themselves. So they take in residents to help them pay the rent, and they cause parking problems for the community. Now, why, if they have a 2.5 height, why you want to come in and change it? Build what you can build with the 2.5. Don't piecemeal it, because you will and cause a problem in the community. That's where they live in to take place in the community. And first of all, they're going to put a throughway. And if you go by there in the map and look, if they build that development where they're trying to build and have a throughway, a truck can't go through there. And the DOT is not going to allow that to happen. And so why? And why the city council waste their time to create a height district, and they say they're going to create the flooding, solve the flooding problem? You need to look at every light rain we have. You look, see what our water is settling at. It's right behind that cottage where they say they're going to probably put a couple of 55-gallon drums to solve the problem on Oz Court. Jimmy used to live on that lot, and he had a problem. It was a two-story home. Number 10 Oz Court, you saw what the city stopped. You see that the car was parked in that throughway, and DOT said, no, you can't have a drive-through from one street to the other. They talk about 3-story. If they're not going to change, stick with the 2-story, and just about everyone in Oz Court. Y'all saw this picture of Oz Court, those 2-story house. Just about every house in Oz Court is a 2-story. There's recent houses built with the 2-story, and the Freeman cottages in Oz Court. Why come in and put what you want to put in there instead of talk to the community? I live right on the corner of Oz Court and Fishburne Street, and I made a motion for denying this development at the neighborhood association meeting. President and the vice president, I had the numbers. They said, well, after everything was settled, and they came back and said, well, we don't have a quorum. So let's take another vote. But no one made a motion from the body to support this development. No one. They do not have a specific plan for this neighborhood, for this development. They haven't talked to DOT or anything. Everything is saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but they have nothing on blueprint to show exactly what's going to happen to this neighborhood and what's going to happen to Oz Court, what's going to happen to these kids coming through there, and people coming off of Fishburne Street, going down a one-way street, to going to 321 Ashley Avenue. So they're creating a problem. But think about this. Why we had city council to do all these amendments, do all these ordinances, and then we're gonna change it to satisfy a developer or investors that don't have any interest in this community. I hope you deny this.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Thank you for your time. Anyone else in opposition? Ms. Carroll, Ms. Gordon?
Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society is opposed to each of these 4 requests to upzone to a 3-story height district. With the exception of isolated examples of out-of-scale new construction, the immediate Ashley Avenue streetscape is predominantly 1 to 2.5-story buildings, and even more so for Orr's Court. As previously stated, it's critical that the Commission defend the integrity of the existing height districts and ensure the character and scale of Charleston's unique neighborhoods are preserved. The Preservation Society supports city staff's position and feels strongly that 3-story buildings would be incompatible with context. So we ask for your
Thank you, Ms.
decision
Carroll.
this evening.
Thank you.
Carol Lang for Charleston Foundation, 40 East Bay Street. I would echo my colleague Ms. Carroll's comments. HCF is also in opposition to agenda items 4 through 7, again citing ordinance section 54 through to 615. And then also responding to Mr. Lawrence's comments about these piecemeal height zonings and tagging along with what Commissioner Jacobs said. And adding to her list, she had a good list of some planning and zoning projects that are going on in the city, but also adding to her list is the city is poised to rewrite the city's peninsula plan. The peninsula plan was last adopted and visited in 1999, and in 1999 they felt that the peninsula ended basically across town. The new Cooper River Bridges the new Cooper River Bridge was not built yet. We were still on the old two. So we've got a real opportunity coming in the next few months to look at the peninsula holistically and adopt a new vision for what we want, what our communities want, and what is appropriate. So, I think it would behoove this commission to deny these applications this evening and wait for this new vision to be adopted. I think it's really important that it's going to be a good process. Will ultimately really engage the public, so on behalf of HCF, I encourage the commission to deny.
Anyone else in opposition? Mr. Chestnut, Mr. Richardson, would you like to talk to us? Thank you.
Yes, sir. In regards to Mr. Lawrence's, we have talked to SCDOT, and they have approved this as a private driveway. Of course, we've done research on that. I've had a full team of civil engineers here on the engineering site for the last 90 days. My drainage is costing over $230,000 that we estimated in order to fix the problem at 3.5 that he has created. He's also flooded out this house over here on Orr's. I've already talked to that gentleman. I've talked to our engineering team as well. We're going to solve everyone's flooding issues with what we have proposed. We have one of the biggest teams in town addressing this situation will be done properly. And in regards to these two ladies, I don't understand what you're opposing because the height isn't changing. The height is still 38 feet, whether it's a 3-story.
If you speak to us, I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
So what I'm trying to ask is, these two ladies are opposing my project.
Yes, sir.
However, what are they opposing? Because the height is still 38 feet. If they're opposing 3 stories, my height is 38 feet. So then they would have to be opposing my 2.5 stories as well, because that's 38 feet. So their opposition doesn't make any sense because there's absolutely no height increase with what we are proposing. I would like some clarification from those two organizations on that as well. But we're simply asking for the height to make these a buildable home. Yes, I agree, the building code, and it might need to be reviewed at a later date, totally agree. But in times of this project is now, unfortunately, it's not in the future. I probably ask that we approve this so we can actually build a suitable structure. Building a 1/2 story under a small little attic, we're gonna look back in 5 or 10 years and say, gosh, that's really strange. All we're asking for is just the walls to do this with an absolute no increase in height. The property next door at 315 Ashley is 50 feet. Ours is 38 feet, which if you go south of Broad, most of those homes are honestly 45 to 50 feet. Our homes are very short, you know, and all the neighbors behind it are short as well. Our elevation's at 4.5 feet. So with the FEMA, we lose the story. We kindly ask that it be approved just based on 38 feet. That's all we need to know is 38 feet. Whether it's 2.5 story or 3 story, it doesn't change. We're just adding a little bit of the wall here so it's a real livable house.
Thank you, Ms. Chestnut. Mr. Richardson.
I'm just gonna follow up. So context and scale come up a lot in urban fabric with all these projects. We've got, you know, we have a lot of emotions and feelings, and we always try to just bring facts. There are a lot of things that even when we present information, they don't want to be heard. There are a lot of technical codes now that when Freedman cottages were built, they were built before electricity. They were built on until or relocated at the turn of the 20th century. We obviously did things a lot different then than we do now. Majority of these homes that are right around this are below the flood line. They are non-conforming. If they were to be built today, they would be elevated just like we are required to by FEMA code and building code and VAR code and zoning code. So that's what we deal with now. When we come in with modern construction, with all the information and the technologies that we have now, we simply have to build everything in the city much higher than our historic friends around us. We're doing the best job that we can. To correct some misstatements from earlier, we had a pre-application meeting with TRC where traffic and transportation weighed in on our driveway. We're not creating a road, we're creating a driveway. We have 4 properties here that are accessed off of 2 right-of-ways. It is compliant with the traffic and transportation codes. We are not damaging the neighborhood with what we are doing. We are coming in and providing a solution that, frankly, if someone comes in and does these properties piecemeal, they don't have to do any of this, and they won't do any of this. I can just tell you, but there's still going to be. We were at BZA 2 weeks ago to deal with all the problem trees that are on the property that are diseased and have fallen over in storms and are cracked and are causing a lot of issues. And we got all those removed and approved, and a lot of support with this very same plan for the very same request. There are multiple steps here, and this is not done. We still have many steps to go through too. We have a long time to go through technical review to bring this, but everywhere in this city, we're dealing with the same issue, which is why when we redid the height districts, there was a provision for special exceptions like this to go up in the height zone. Again, we're not asking for this flippantly, but if you actually want to look at the data on this site and what is happening here on this block and in this area, Noonan Street is at an elevation of 11 feet. I know because I'm working on a project over there. That's why people cut through. It doesn't flood. We're 7 feet below that. It is contextually inappropriate to compare the two. They are not the same. It falls away from the cross down. It's just geologically how it works over here. We're the last person in the middle. We're the last one. We have to deal with all the problems that are coming in. We're doing the best that we can with it. But I can promise you, if someone doesn't come in here with a solution like this, they won't have a solution. They will simply do something self-serving and get around. They'll just do what they want to do and what they need to do. And I will correct, and I will adamantly oppose that we do not care. We care about this city. We live here, we work here. I proudly walk on every street that we do a project here. We care about Charleston. So if it is an issue that there needs more technical review or questions and answering or a quorum vote at the west side, we're happy to defer to go do that because we do the right thing on every single project here. But you all have to understand that is zoning code rewrite, and I was a planning commissioner for 4 years. By going through and all that, we're talking about years before that is enacted. And the reason why these mechanisms were put in place by the BAR is to deal with these things in between comprehensive plan rewrites and zoning code rewrites. We can't just simply say, we're going to kick the can down the road, we're going to put our ostrich heads back in the sand, and someone else is going to deal with the problem. That is irresponsible. And you as a body, and you as a staff, and we as licensed professionals owe it to our city to do a better job than just kick a can collectors. So we will ask for a deferral. If you would please honor that, we will go back to the west side. We will bring the plans that we have here, and the facts of the site. And we just ask that everyone considers and listens to us, because I promise you, we're bringing the best solution for this property.
So, Mr. Morgan, just so I do procedure right, are you, as the applicants, are you requesting deferral on
Yes,
these
sir.
four
Formally
pieces
requesting the
process? That's it, right? Do that thing, come it back? Okay, and there's no timeline on that there, because they're recommending. Okay. Yeah, you know, I think this is a very difficult issue. There's tremendous challenges. We hear from the neighborhoods. You know, I appreciate the fact that you do that, try to work out something that we can all live with, other commission members. I mean, that's y'all's right to do, but I'll give you all rights since we've listened to y'all.
I do want to comment that in 14 years being on this commission, that this was the most logical, comprehensive application that I've seen. A lot of the questions that I have were asked and answered. Christopher, we talked about this when we were actually looking at the stories versus and I don't know if it was Gordon or if it was Sunday, but you know, those of us who work in some sort of development or construction, there's a huge discrepancy between these elevations and where we need the finished floor height of these buildings to be. And I think we're going to run into this over and over again, whether we're raising buildings, whether we're designing new construction. It's just disingenuous to think that this is going to work when we have these disparities. So I'm glad that the applicant is asking for a deferral. I'll make a motion to defer. But I do think that as much as we would like to wait and go through the process that we have coming, we can't put all these projects on hold. And my concern is this is coming from the applicant, so I think a deferral is appropriate. But if we just keep deferring, it is kicking the can down the road, and this process does take years. And we're going to have people who are just caught in that and are not able to move forward. So I think every single, going from 2.5 stories to 3 stories, again, the height itself is not impacted. We see this all the time in terms of just the structure. It doesn't affect the parking, it doesn't affect the runoff, it doesn't affect flooding. So I really don't see the objection to going from, you know, what we call a 1.5 story home, just 2-story home. It's the same height. You're really not changing anything with how it impacts the surrounding property. Visually, you know, the height's the same. Sure, you might have it be a little more within the roof line, but I'm just having a problem understanding why we're not able to approve projects like this.
Let me just say procedurally, he's deferring, he's pulling it off.
Oh, that's right. We don't even have to.
So that's
vote.
good.
That's right.
But since we listened to it so long, I want to give commission members and the applicant a chance to hear what we have to say.
Thank you.
Mr. Bailey?
Yeah. Agree with maybe all of what Ms. Johnson said. As I listened to what seemed like a good engineering solution, I don't know, I'm not qualified to render judgment on that. What appears to be a elegant design solution, I keep reminding myself that we're a zoning board and not a design board and not a technical review board. And that we have a district up here that, how long ago was?
17.
It was 2.5 stories was established to be appropriate. And I don't want to put us in the position of every time this comes up, we're sitting here trying to decide if your engineering solution is a good one or your design solution is the right one. I think we need to think about the zoning of this area. And I agree, we shouldn't just say, well, maybe that'll come up in another 5 years or the next comprehensive. I agree, that's not fair. But I worry about the precedent of making a design and an engineering decision for a specific piece of property because some new thing has come up that doesn't quite work. And so I think there's some urgency to tackling this issue. But I am grateful that the applicant is deferred and going to see if they can take a crack at it with the neighborhood, and maybe city staff and others can put their heads together to think about whether or not we have a more global issue that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
And I'd like to add that I'm glad you deferred it, because I think it gives you an opportunity to talk to to Mr. Lawrence and the rest of the neighbors. I mean, we're not a design board, but maybe it can be something that looks more like the neighborhood. I mean, I'm born and raised in Charleston. I want to see our city remain, and our property owners are really incredibly important. And, but our guidelines are changing. I mean, our freeboard is changing, our floodplains are changing. I mean, we have to address any lots that are vacant in the city that you have to build on. And I mean, and Charleston's not known for its large lots. We have small lots. And if you're looking at a 20-foot house and you give it 2.5 stories, and you want to park underneath, so you have 1 story and a half story in which to live. And I think we have to look at what looks good in our city that does have parking underneath it. We have a serious parking problem. Telling them to go park on the street and having a 1-car driveway is not really what we need. You can't even have somebody over for dinner and have a place to park. So I think that we have to look at both of this as a zoning commission. We have to look at what's happening in our city, which is happening outside right now, and our inability to even get to our meeting to even vote on this application. So I think we have to look at what can be built, how it meshes with the existing neighborhoods, and how more communication between the owners and the new builders and any lots that have to be, or a fire happens, for goodness sake. Well, can they build back again? I mean, Mr. Waring said it better than anybody. When we went to the 2-foot freeboard, if a fire happens and they have to rebuild, it's going to affect the affordability of what they have to rebuild. So I think we have to take all of that into consideration and do a lot more work than just basically giving it 2.5 story when I think feet is pretty much more important to me than height. Let me just say, height is more important to me. So, so I appreciate your deferral, and I hope you meet with them, and I hope that y'all can work out whatever concerns that they have, because they're very important. They grew up in this neighborhood, they live here, and they're the most important people to discuss this.
Thank you, Ms. Levis.
I'm
Ms. Lassane?
I'm gonna say it just to say it again, because I think it needs to be heard one more time. I agree, and I agree, which means we have a lot of work to do. And it's critical work to do. And it starts by listening to the community. It starts by understanding that we do have a problem that we have to address, and we aren't an engineering design team. And if we start picking you over you, then we start picking winners and losers. We need to all be on the same page. We need to all speak with the community. And we have a sense of urgency that I'm going to press staff as hard as I can press to get our director with an RFP to get this rezoning code. Because even as we're working on the whole rezoning code, we can identify hot spots. We need ordinances yesterday.
We need a master plan.
Yeah, we could be working on a master plan and develop hot spots and get an ordinance before Christmas if we needed to. And I think we need to be this responsive because we do have new data. We do have new FEMA, we do have elevation, we do have freeboard, we have stories, we have nomenclature problems we need to straighten out. And there's a sense of urgency to it, and I cannot impress on that. I mean, I talk every day with people about this. So thank you very much for your consideration of deferral. Thank you very much for being back to the community. We'll get this fixed. We're all listening. We all have good points with a great sense of urgency to go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Lassane.
Yeah, and I'll be brief because I agree with so many of the comments from my colleagues. This is a real issue. It's important. This has been a great discussion. I think we all realize that there have been developments that make the height recommendation from 5 years ago now problematic, and we all recognize that. And I think I wrote down sense of urgency, and my colleagues are now using that phrase too, and I think we all agree with that. I think the issue that we all have is there's 6 of us sitting up here. The city has made a major effort, engaged a lot of people in creating a height recommendation that was approved by city council, and you're asking 4 of us to overrule that. And I think that most of my colleagues agree that the community needs to weigh in on this. You have brought up a serious problem. I don't think we're sticking our heads in the sand, respectfully. Y'all can still take this to council if you want. You're welcome to go to the city council and see if they will overrule us. But I think that the community needs to engage on this. We don't even have a recommendation from the neighborhood in front of us. So this is a serious issue. It's going to be a problem. If we turned you all down today, there would be 4 or 5 people coming right behind you with the same issue. So we need to address this. And I think your deferral, helps that process along. So I
Thank you,
appreciate
Mr.
that.
Slade. And, you guys got this tremendous challenges to build in this area, not one, but plural challenges, and we know that. And I understand y'all's concern, the time-sensitive issue, we're talking about rewrites and things like that, which, as you said, takes a lot of time. And we appreciate that. I mean, there's property rights, there's building time rights, and money to build, and the cost of, your investment. So we appreciate that. I would say hats off to Mr. Rich and Mr. Chestnut for doing this tonight, because I think you made the right decision. It made our decision a little easier, but I think you all did the right decision. I'll remember this decision by y'all. I think it was very wise y'all to do. And we hope that there can be some conclusion, and then we do our part to try to be able to say we're ready, So thank you both.
I'd just say one other thing, Mr. Chairman, and that is, I don't think we need to wait for some big ordinance rewrite to come up with a solution to this that we can all agree on, and then we can move forward with, whenever this issue comes up. That if we've got it, if there's a solution that we all agree on, we can agree how to handle every single one of them and try to, instead of as Ms.
You're right.
Jacob said, picking
Hopefully, the more meetings with this neighborhood, that y'all can have a consensus and things like that, and come back, and we can be an easier decision for all of us.
May I say one more thing?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think as we go through this process, and I don't know if this is you, Christopher, or how we go about this, I think there is a massive disconnect between what we know a 2.5 story to mean and maybe what the public thinks a 2.5 story is. And I think there needs to be some conversation or maybe some different verbiage used. Exactly, because I think even when I talk to people, a lot of times they think 2.5 stories just means you have 2, 9 foot or 10 foot, and then the other one's half of that, which obviously, is not practical. But there is that, I think just in the general lexicon, there is that thought out there that there's not an understanding of what that means. So if we could maybe clarify that as we are discussing and going forward with that, I think it would be very helpful.
And I'm gonna go a little out of order, Mr. Chestnut, you had something to say?
I tried to mention that to the vice president, if possible, if you could have a representative come to one of the west side and east side and Wagner Terrace meetings and post in their Facebook, it would make all the difference in the world, because there is mass confusion.
Okay.
There is mass.
Thank you, Mr. Chestnut. Again, hats off to both of y'all for doing this tonight, and we hear you. And we want to try to come to a conclusion with all of y'all in the neighborhood. So
And
thank
we
you.
wanted, and I appreciate y'all hearing more the technical side. Typically, you look at a blank TMS
Yep.
and say this or that. And I think it was important for y'all to understand everything that goes into this. And you do have a mechanism. It's in the code. It's whether you have the comfort. And I think I wanted to just express the technical reasons why I think in the future you will have more comfort in enacting that mechanism, as you've done for us twice in the past, based off the very same reasons.
Thank
So thank you all for tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank all the neighborhood for coming out and the associations. We appreciate it.
I want y'all to know, have y'all ever seen a half a story that's not an attic? It's an
I mean, it's
So-
always within the roof line. I mean, there's little palladium.
That's that, the roof they're talking about there.
Harrison, why don't you come on back
You're
in?
not married to a
It
6'6"
doesn't
guy.
affect all of Long Island.
You're not married to a 6'6"
Chair.
guy.
And so
Do
it doesn't always-
we only have the sidings left?
Yes, sir.
And it's not,
Yes, sir.
today, it's gonna be some other. I made a commitment based
No,
on.
no, we're gonna see if we can take some of them together. Ms. Harrison, so we're gonna, so we can finish up, come on in. And Ms. Harrison, we're gonna let you later on talk to us about your golf cart and how you drive around the city, but not right now. So.
Give me a high one, Shane.
Thank you,
Is
sir.
that how you got here?
But
Not today.
not today.
Not
So,
today.
we're gonna move on. Mr. Morgan, we're now at zonings. For the sake of time, any of these zonings we can take together, they all need to be set. Or,
We just approved everything
Wait,
that
no.
goes on.
Yes.
wait a minute, no.
We can take the, I believe we can take the,
Which one?
four is different. We can take 5 and 6 and 7 together.
Okay,
So,
okay. Well, that helps.
so these won't take long.
Zoning is number 1, 820 East Estates Boulevard, Long Branch, West Ashley, TMS number 3100200015, 2.26 acres, SR1. It was R4 in Charleston County. Who's gonna be handling this?
I'll handle
Mr.
these.
Morgan.
And again, this is a situation where the R4 is closest to our SR1, and you see when we brought stuff into the paper, it's in SR1.
Mr. Bailey moves to approve. Is there a second?
I'll
Ms.
second.
Johnson, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It's unanimous vote. Number 2 is 2863 Maybank Highway, Johns Island, TMS number 213-0000135-138, 1.59 acres. Request zoning is GB. It was zoned Johns Island Corridor Overlay, JOMHCO. Mixed use in Charleston County. Mr. Morgan.
And this is the Low Tide Brewery, for those of you who might know where that is.
Well, Mr.
It's
Bailey
on,
knows.
it's on Bluebird. It's across the street from, I believe that's the post office right there, on Johns Island. There's GB zoning across the street. There's GB zoning to the east. So the most compatible zoning we felt for the business and for the area of Johns Island was the GB. A couple of pictures. It is in our city center. The front part is, and the rear part is in our suburban, but the overlay for the county went into those rear areas. Here's an image of what's already there, Low Tide Brewing, and so we're recommending approval of GB for that.
I know no one wants to be heard. Is the commission members?
Move for approval.
Ms. Lamper, second for approval, second by Ms. Hussein, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. Number 3, 1978 Maybank Highway, James Island, PMS number 3430019 acres, requesting under the GB. It was zoned same Maybank Highway Corridor Overlay Community Commercial in Charleston County.
And this is a site where it's a former house. I think at one point it was the mustard seed over here.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe Boulevard Diner, I can't remember the name of it. There's one in that same
Okay,
road.
yeah,
But
yeah,
anyway, it's a vacant building, commercial building at present. It has that commercial designation in Charleston County. It's got general business to the east, general business across the street. It is in our neighborhood edge, and it's adjacent to a city center area, so we felt comfortable with the GB. Here's an image of the building. It's, again, vacant and for sale at the moment, but they have plans on putting some sort of commercial use in the building, and we were recommending for the GB.
Move for approval.
Second.
Ms. Jacobs, motion, Mr. Hussein, second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition? It's a unanimous vote. Number 4 is 4 Toby Road, Carolina Terrace, West Ashley, TMS number 4181000109117 acres, west SR2, was zone R4 in Charleston County.
And this one
Johnny
is a little
Blue
bit
I know that name.
different from the other ones on this list because it's on a smaller lot, so that's why we had to give it a SR2, and the other lots that we've already annexed in this area are SR2, so that's the closest compatible district to it.
Thank you.
Move for approval.
Ms. Lampus,
Second.
approval, second by Ms. Johnson. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone in opposition? Unanimous. We're gonna take number 5, which is 31 Avondale, TMS number 418140029.26 acres, that's SR1. It was R4 in Charleston County. We're gonna take number 6, which is 5 Oakdale, Avondale, West Ashley, TMS number 418150042.22 acres, that's SR1. It was R4 in Charleston County. And number 7, which is 22 Oakdale, Avondale, West Ashley, TMS number 4181000104124.24 acres, that's SR1. It was R4 in Charleston County. Mr. Morgan.
And these, we've got the, sorry, kind of back up. So here's the Avondale one and SR1, most compatible district, in the county. Then we go to the second one, which is also R4. It's next to a row of SR1, Arcadian and Oakdale. And then the final one is this structure that is in the midst of SR1 here on Oakdale Place. And they are going to SR1.
We're gonna give this young lady 7 stars for the zoning, the annexation. But three double stars is close to Avondale, so we're trying to get that.
Yeah, they were getting Avondale into the city.
I know.
It's so hard.
This is the most annexations that we have had in a very long
that's
time, so
good.
good job.
Motion, is there a motion?
Second.
I'm gonna take that as a first. Second by Ms. Levinson.
It's reflex.
It's a reflex. By saying aye.
Second.
Wait, the ayes have it. Anybody in opposition? So that's unanimous on all 3 of those. Staff updates?
Yes.
Okay, before we go on staff updates, just real fast, and I'll get you in 1 second. I want to say eventually I want to get to hear about how I can work with some of you guys, because Mr. Bailey just got back from England. Usually Mr. Sane on Facebook is nowhere and Miss Harrison is in Iceland or wherever. So, I mean, if I go to Atlanta, it's a big thing. So
Depress us right now.
it's amazing. Mr. Bailey's always all in Europe somewhere. Anyway, go ahead, Mr. Morgan. I'm sorry.
Okay, so we've been asked, I guess, about 3 different things. One, first off, kind of going up the scale, I guess, Union Pier, you all had asked for some updates.
Yes.
And I communicated with Jacob Lindsay, who you all might remember, who is heading up the Union Pier efforts with the commercial developer Lowe that is working on the entitlements there. And he told me that they are expecting that there will be some engagement events for the public and for you all in the August and October timeframes. And then they won't really have a plan working on this until probably 2023. And then that will be something that they'll be bringing before you all. So it's a somewhat slow moving target right now, but they are making progress on it.
Just the question about that is, if he's planning on doing something like that, I know that there's always the issue of if 4 or more of us are in a room, it's a meeting, right? But I guess, if he's inviting us, is he inviting us as a group, or is he just saying the public and then we can just attend as
I think there are a
members?
series of events.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be a large public meeting or if it'll be targeted small groups or
Right.
what they're going to do. I think if you all are there in the context of a large public meeting on
Right,
your
right.
own,
Right, that's not on a meeting.
200 people or something, I don't think it's really viewed as a
We've
planning
had that
commission
before
meeting.
many
Because
times.
y'all aren't, the ones who are the speakers, you're just listening.
Right.
But they are well aware of what the requirements are. Same thing for city council.
Yeah.
I think the big thing is, I think I've heard from commission members, we just don't want to get this thrown us at the end.
Understood.
We want to be involved in it, and I know you want the same thing, so we're involved and we understand it and are a part of it. So we feel good about it. And,
Can I ask a question about for my colleagues here? Do any of y'all have any issue with the mixed use zoning that we have currently in place that is kind of
Just overall.
facilitating these large?
I don't want to cut you, but this gentleman's here and I just don't want to
Oh,
make
I'm
him
sorry.
wait, so I'm sorry.
I mean, I guess I wanted to request that, based on the conversations proceeding, that I'm granted the ability to come back with my project. Now, while I believe the rules are that if it gets voted on, I can, I think given circumstance that it's a greater issue, that myself and my partner should have the ability to do that, to present again.
So you'd like a deferral, is that what you're?
Yes, please.
Well, we can't ask for a
I know.
deferral at this
Since we've already
point.
voted on it.
You'd have to do a reconsideration, and then you all would have to consider that.
Next meeting, we have.
Potentially.
Can we do it now?
Can we
I mean,
undo
this
what we
is-
did?
So it would have to be somebody voted
It'd
in
have to be
favor
on
of the
notice, it
motion.
would have to be,
It's gotta be on.
I will make a motion to reconsider.
it has to be
We
on
have to be in
notice.
public.
We have to have
They've
public
got it.
notice
The
that's
applicant
coming
has to
back
do it.
up.
Can't do
We
that.
we could do it in the next meeting then.
Yes.
Potentially,
If we
I'm
can
gonna
get-
have to look at the
So
statute.
we hear you and we'll try to
Yeah.
accommodate.
I think that's a fair
I
question.
think it's absolutely fair.
All right.
So we'll try to
And we
work that through
cannot
that.
do it now.
But
they're
talk
not.
to staff after this, and they'll see if they can, time-wise, we need to see when we can get it for the next meeting.
Can we have a Zoom meeting just for that purpose?
I
Properly
don't know that we can
noticed.
do that because the city's not going back in person meeting, so anyway, so we appreciate it, and we'll try to accommodate.
And we very much understand it.
Thank you, sir.
And I will say that the check, your reconsideration may need to be filed by the deadline, which is, I believe, Monday at noon. So
Does he have to do it, or we can?
Can we?
I think it
do
has
it
to
on our
come from
own?
the applicant. It has to come from, because you all have already
We've
acted.
already acted on it,
But what, if we
But
make,
we
if
can make
one
a
of us
motion.
makes a motion to reconsider,
but it's not on the agenda, it's not
I'll
noticed to the
check with our
public,
legal
so I
folks
think
on
that's.
I think we can do that.
But yeah,
I think it has to come from the applicant.
Okay,
Yeah.
check.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you staying, and I'm sorry, Sunday. I didn't- I
right,
just
and
wanted to let him
that's
go.
what,
I just wanted to ask if any of y'all have any
It's a part of just
feelings
the
about
parliamentary
all the
procedure.
use and about the height.
and I think you're
You know,
right.
I just drive down Morrison Drive in East Bay Street, and I just want us to, I just
It
don't
looks
want
like a
mixed
different
use
city.
to be available to everybody to go in there and have the height. I just think it's more kind of look back and reconsider. If y'all are
I hear you.
interested.
Chris, what other updates did you have? I'm sorry.
Okay, sure. So, the next one, is the peninsula plan. The RFP is out. I think you all were sent copies of that. Chloe sent them to you, I think, last week.
She did.
And those proposals are due in on August 23rd. I would estimate that then we'll have a selection committee that is already set up. Selection committees are typically staff and council members, and those are probably would be happening in mid-September. And then late September would be potentially council approval of a contract, assuming that the selection committee had a recommended proposer, and then they would probably get to work, by November or something like that. So it's going to be mostly a 2023 effort.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other updates?
And we are going to be requesting some more money in the budget because we had $350,000 allocated. We really feel like there needs to be more money allocated to that, given what we've heard from all the partner organizations and the public about, things that they'd like to see in that. So we're trying to get some more money in next year's budget, and the fact that it started later may be helpful towards that too. So.
Thank you.
Then finally, I think you all wanted recurring updates on the zoning ordinance, and I know that the zoning ordinance RFP went to the procurement folks, but it has not gone out for review yet, and I don't know why it has not yet gone out. And I
You'll
asked
let us
Robert
know.
about it today, and he said he was going to be checking with procurement to see why it has not gone out yet.
Anything affordable housing? I know we kind of, it's been the summertime, and it's tough to get people to talk through this stuff, but I know Mr. Lane, we've all been busy. So I know we're gonna go group on that a little bit.
We can get you on that.
And we wanted to have a meeting, I know, having a discussion with the different
Yes.
providers, like
Yes.
Charleston County folks, and I knew that they were in the midst, one of the reasons we kind of held off is they were in the midst of a huge effort to put together kind of affordable housing potential ballot initiative, which I'm not sure where the county is going on that, but I think they will know that very soon, because I think there's a deadline for what gets on the
Right.
ballot, so I think August may be a better month for us to be able to get them involved, because they'll have been through that.
And I've also asked Mr. Morgan, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
I've also asked Mr. Morgan on from time to time, not every meeting, maybe we can meet 15 minutes ahead and have somebody come to us, like, I can't remember the gentleman's who. Polyakov or somebody from one of those who's talked about their efforts of affordable housing, see how maybe we can tie into that, or how we can work through some of those, and maybe a little education for us on that.
Because they had a ribbon cutting earlier today on Archer Middle School with some of that. So I think.
Yeah, so I think that maybe, not every meeting, but maybe every few meetings, we have somebody come 15 minutes ahead, just a very brief education for us about what else is going on in the community that'll help us. Chris, anything else?
That was it, unless you all had other questions.
Any possibility of us meeting with council in any time in the future like we did?
I mean, we can do that.
I mean, we just hadn't done it. When was the last time we met with
It's been a
city
while, it's been the Zoom meeting we had with them.
We do, we have that very confusing Zoom.
Yeah, comprehensive.
I mean,
in person.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. Ms. Jacobs, you had something?
No, I was just gonna mention, I watched actually twice a webinar that was put out called Rewriting the City Zoning Code. It was done by Columbus, Ohio area, and it's a 2022, so it's very current. and it was two planners and two affordable housing nonprofit organizations talking about things that, and it sounded like exactly the kind of things that we're facing and how they're looking at it and some of their considerations. I'm happy to share the
Can you
link.
share it? That'd be
Yeah,
wonderful.
it's only an hour, but it was very informative. I think that there's people very sharp. They're repeating some of the very same problems we're having, but it's good to know that other people are really seeing the same things, and there were a few micro things in there that I thought, hey, we ought to pay attention to this. It's too bad I can't get CEUs for that, but it was supported by the United Way here. It was called Learning United, and it was very well done.
So if you had to watch it twice, that means that a couple of us.
I gotta watch
might-
it.
I know, I thought the same
I gotta watch it at least 3 times.
I watched it.
I gotta get the Cliff Notes
I
first.
watched
The Cliff
it
Notes.
twice because I wanted to record the times where if I want to go back.
I watch it in slow motion.
And not because I
I know that, when's our, I know I don't have to because I'm a lawyer, but I still think it's still important to get that continuing ed on. But when are the
These
the
damn
forums?
lawyers remind us they're lawyers.
December 31st.
Right, and so I was wondering, like, if there's a way for, I know that we kind of all independently do it, but perhaps there's a way, like, I don't know if y'all do this in-house, or if, you know.
People a topic or two that we'd be interested in.
Right.
That you could do a CE for us.
Right, because I know that
Please send it
Charlotte
out.
did.
And we did that a
So-
few times.
so
It was helpful.
We were allowed to do that, I think, at some point, by the, like, APA and all that. I'm not sure what the regulations are on that. I'll have to check and see, you know, having a webinar shown in like our conference.
Right.
But we can
Or even
look
if
into
y'all,
that.
I mean,
You wanna do one on golf courts in the city, I know what you do.
a golf cart lane.
That's what we need.
Donna and I may have to get you down
I don't, no, I think Mr. Bailey said about the app. That thing about an app about flooded streets. We need to make some money on that thing.
Really good.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Really good.
All right, any,
Will you get John and I ride home?
Do you want
I'm actually staying downtown, but
No, we need
shredded. Yeah, I was, but I don't.
No,
I don't wanna
I
mess
get
you
my
up, y'all.
husband to come get me.
Can you get that from?
I can get my husband.
Yeah. Just right away, because I'm gonna be downtown for a little while. I'm sorry, I didn't plan to be downtown. I'm meeting David Palmer. I'm sorry. I wish I'd known ahead, I wouldn't. Where do you have to go?
South Windermere.
Oh, just in South Windermere. Yeah, I can take it. Yeah, that's kind of on your way. Yeah,
It's not out of the way.
No, no, I'm sorry. I would have known, I would have told you. I'm meeting David.
We adjourned?
We're adjourned.
We're adjourned.
No, no.
Thank you.
We're discussing who's gonna give a ride home. Hold on, wait a minute.
I'm meeting David. I heard David Palmer called me.
I am gonna find out exactly what Amber Island and Mount Pleasant. They have
He likes to eat good.
There's a space one that kind of utilizes
My best friend.